Hello and welcome everyone to this another episode of Unlearning the Falsehoods. Something that I want to clarify before starting this episode. I guess this is the 22nd episode in this series. Uh, I am no historian. I am not trained historian. I am not qualified to be called a historian. All I am doing through this series is appealing to your own reason. Okay, with this current, we are in this current times of information warfare. Okay, the wars are won long before a single bullet is fired. In this era of social media, uh, it is usually an information war. If you see, people are very proactive, very aggressive when it comes to putting out information, be it X, be it any other social media platforms, YouTube, and all the other mainstream media channels as well. Okay, so the wars are fought today in the newsrooms in the form of information warfare. Okay, so in this era where it is very difficult to determine which source of information to trust and which source of information to not trust, okay, all I'm doing here is appealing to your reason. I'm presenting some literary evidence in front of you that already exists in public domain, but so far many of us have not you know read it. Many of us have not came across it to analyze it because conveniently our history textbooks hide these things from us. But that is again an agenda for different series, different YouTube channel, or different video altogether. But in these videos, in the series of Unlearning the Falsehoods, all I'm doing is appealing to your inner sense of reason. Okay, after knowing everything, after knowing too many scandals, after reading multiple history sources, okay, does it make sense to you what our history textbooks teach us? All right, so this is all an appeal to your reason. I'm presenting some literary evidence in front of you, and yeah. So next up we are going to talk about the National Congress. Okay, we call that as Indian National Congress. I have been a fervent opposer of this word Indian because I've made it abundantly clear in many of the previous videos in this series what India actually means, what does it stand for. There is also one of the posts on our Instagram pages as to why must I identify as an Indian, because that word has no organic origin in Bharat. So how exactly do we become Indian? Okay, so you'll need too much of a background information to really catch the drift of what I'm telling in these further videos of this series. So I very much urge you to go through all the videos in this series. They are not long videos, hardly some of them would be 20 minutes, but most of them are somewhere in between 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, so today in this video we are going to focus on INC, that is the National Congress of Bharat at that time. Okay, so here you need to focus on there is a backdrop. You need a certain context to understand a certain historical episode. Okay, so from 1707, this is a watershed moment for the history of Bharat. Why? Because number one is Aurangzeb. Okay, Aurangzeb, he dies in 1707, and there is a partition of Bengal in 1905. So it is almost 200 years. Okay, Aurangzeb started off as the governor general, as the governor of the province of Bengal under the Mughal Empire. He died in 1707. And Bengal was partitioned in 1905. So there is a time span of 200 years in that. Okay. Now, so when we talk about consciousness, okay, when we talk about consciousness, we talk about the anchor of our identity. Okay. Now, the pagans of Bharat, okay, the polytheists or pagans of Bharat, they were like, fodder for both the monotheistic traditions. It was like It was like a treasure hunt for them, for both the monotheistic traditions, be it Christianity or be it Islam. Both of them were trying to get more and more converts because they had stumbled upon this large reserve of pagans. Okay, they thought that if we convert them, we can legitimize and justify our dominance all across the world. And it still continues. Okay, there has been no active measures by the government whatsoever to stop these stop these things. There are definitely half-hearted measures, but they're not enough. Okay, so yes, now let's talk about the Islamic consciousness. Okay, so right starting from the contact of Islam with the Bharatiya subcontinent, there were people that were converted, but you cannot just simply discard the practices of centuries. Okay, the people whom the pagans, whom the Islamic plunderers and conquerors, they were managed to convert. Okay, now their forefathers have been living by certain cultural practices. So even after conversion, they were not willing, they were not consciously willing to give up those practices. Okay, you might still see such evidence in your day to day life. If you speak any of your Muslim colleagues, they'll tell you they still practice some of the cultural and traditional practices. Okay, so all these scholars, Dehlavi, Barelvi, and all of them, they advocated return to the pristine form of Islam, the way Prophet practiced it. Okay, so this anchored their consciousness with an identity that has originated from that part of the world. Okay, so gradually there came up movements who advocated that no, these are all things that are not permissible or permitted according to our scripture, and hence you should do away with the traditional and cultural practices. All right, so there are again two layers over here. The idea that there has to be a written down constitution reeks of monotheistic bias, because it was they who came up with this idea that unless and until something is written down, it has no substantial standing. Keep in mind, they are the ones who call themselves people of the book, because they believe in this idea that if and only if certain things are written down in the form of a religious scripture, then and only then you can qualify as a genuine nation state. So the idea that you need a written law or a written constitution in itself has an inherent monotheistic bias, because they have a written down book, Bible, Quran. So they think that everything has to be written down, and only if it is written down, then and only then it qualifies as a law. Okay, and there is also something that you need to keep in mind. Right after the you know right during and right after the partition of Bengal, there was increased political consciousness amongst the Muslim converts of Bharat. Okay, so what happened was, in 1905, when Bengal was partitioned, there sprang up. Okay, there already were, but there sprang up these revolutionary movements, and most of these revolutionary movements were armed, meaning they were ready to lay down their lives just for the sake of independence and Swaraj. So I'm going to quote right now one of the revolutionaries who goes by the name of Barendra Ghosh. These are his writings. Okay, he has written this. Let's see what he has to say. So, post partition of Bengal in 1905 on religious lines. So, just a brief recap. In 1905, it was Curzon who partitioned Bengal for. It was a political maneuver by the British, because they were appeasing their brethren, monotheistic brethren, that were the Muslims, because they were Christians, they were Muslims, both of them were the people of the book. So they had this mutual beneficial alliance that we could corner the pagans if we come together. Okay, and there was mutual benefit on both the sides. What were the British getting out of this alliance? Some sort of a surety that the nationalism can be nipped inside the bud. What were the Muslims getting out of this? A security that even after they leave, okay, they need some sort of a guarantee that the entire power would not be transferred to the pagans. Okay, so this was an alliance of mutual convenience between the two. Now I'm going to quote a revolutionary, that is Barendra Ghosh. Okay, let's hear what he has to say. Will the Bengali worshippers of Shakti shrink from shedding of the blood? The number of Englishmen in this country is not above 1 lakh and a half. And what is the number of English officials in each district? If you are firm in your resolution, you can in a single day bring British rule to an end. Lay down your life, but first take a life. The worship of the goddess will not be consummated if you sacrifice your lives at the shrine of independence without shedding blood. Okay. Now there are two things that I want you to focus upon here. Here, Barinder Ghosh is appealing to the sentiment of nationalism based on what? Okay, based on a tradition that is Shakti. Shakti is a tradition that is rooted in our dharma, that is the way of our life. Okay, this displays, or this is the manifestation of the idea that we stand by, that for us the Rashtra and dharma are not separate, they are one and a single entity. Okay, they are not mutually exclusive, to say the very least. All right. So yes, this was what Barinder Ghosh was appealing to the revolutionaries, that if you adhere to the Shakti traditions of this civilization, independence or Swaraj is not far away. Okay. So in order to evoke nationalist sentiments, he falls back upon the traditions or the cultural practices of this land. It does not fall back upon some misplaced ideas of European polity. Okay, what it did was, when Bengal was partitioned and when there were armed revolutionaries who were coming up, what it did was, there were many Swadeshi movements that came up. Okay, there were many Swadeshi movements that came up. So what is the intellectual justification for these Swadeshi movements? If you realize, in many of our previous videos, we have discussed that the idea of capitalism, okay, it is the bedrock of colonialism. They had to find new lands, to find markets for the surplus manufacturing that they were doing in their country. Okay, so think of it as this way: they are manufacturing so many of goods. What would happen? Okay, what would happen if the colonies that they were ruling, they developed their own robust and solid manufacturing base? They would not need these countries anymore. Okay, so imagine if Bharat in current times, if we have a solid manufacturing base, we would not need to import majority of the goods that we import these days. So these Western countries, they made sure that there has to be no transfer of technology to these colonies, because if they themselves become manufacturing hubs, they'll not need other countries as well. Case in point, okay, if you need, the case in point is China. Why do you think China developed aggressively? Why did China develop its manufacturing sector so aggressively? Because they realized, if you want to divorce from this idea of Western capitalism and neo-colonialism, you need to develop a solid manufacturing base. That is how you become self-reliant. Okay. So that is why Swadeshi movement started right after the partition of Bengal in 1905, and it hurt them where it was, it hurt them where it hurts the most. That is the British. The import of the British goods, they went down significantly, and yes, it was where it hurts. But what this did was, such movements, armed revolutionary movements, such Swadeshi movements, what did it do was, it brought to the surface the ideological differences between the members of the National Congress. When I say National Congress, I mean INC, Indian National Congress, but I am not a big fan of that word, that is Indian. So that is why I keep saying National Congress. It brought to the surface the ideological differences between so there were two groups formed inside the Congress. One of them was moderate, another one was extremist. Okay, so here if you see, the moderates were unnational and the extremists were national. Okay, to this very day, if you look at the political landscape of Bharat in 2024, you will find political parties who will be unnational. I am not saying anti-national, I am saying unnational, because they subscribe to the ideologies that are not organic to this nation. Whereas if you look at other set of political parties that are usually put on the right side of the political spectrum, they subscribe to the ideologies that are organic to this land. Okay, so if you observe, now I'm going to read out statements by political leaders on both the sides. Okay, so after 1905 partition of Bengal and after revolutionary movements, after Swadeshi movements, there emerged one section of politicians in the National Congress who were described as moderates, who focused on constitutional methods, peaceful revolt, peaceful protests, and whatnot. So one of those leaders who believed in the moderates and whom I like to call as unnational was Gopal Krishna Gokhale. He was the political mentor of Mohandas Gandhi, and let's read what he has to say. Okay, these are his words, not mine. Only madmen outside lunatic asylums could think or talk of independence. Okay, for him, according to him, if somebody is demanding complete independence, that is Swaraj, they would be lunatics. Some have gone so far as to talk of independence as an object of practical pursuit. We owe to the best interest of the country to resist the propaganda with all our resources. It means that the sure destruction, or at any rate the definite postponement of all these opportunities for slow but peaceful progress, which are at present within our reach. There is no alternative to British rule. This is he saying, not me. There is no alternative to British rule, not only for now, but for a long time to come, and any attempts made to disturb it, directly or indirectly, are bound to recoil on our own heads. Okay, here Gopal Krishna Gokhale, the political mentor of Mohandas Gandhi, says that there is no alternative to British rule and only the madmen, only people outside mental asylums and lunatics talk of independence. Now, if you compare this with the current narrative that the Congress is propagating, you'll find, similarities that are dangerous, that will evoke fear inside you that how exactly are there so many similarities between the narrative of Congress in 1905 and in 2024? Okay, so this is he saying, not me. These are his statements. So he according to me is an unnational because the bedrock of his thoughts, the bedrock of his consciousness, the intellectual repository from which he draws his ideas, okay, that repository is not organic to Bharat. He is drawing his ideas from European political ideas and political principles. Okay, those ideas have come out of separate revolutions. That is a topic and agenda for a separate video altogether. We will do that series, but right now, for your understanding, okay, his political ideas were based on European nationalism. Now let's come to the other side, the extremists, okay, who advocated these ideas of armed revolutionary and Swadeshi and all the boycott of all the foreign goods. Now that part of the Congress, the leaders of that part of the Congress were Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, and Lala Lajpat Rai. Okay, these were true nationalists in the real sense. So let's see, Bipin Chandra Pal, who belonged to the extremist, so-called extremist part, and that I like to call as national. He wrote a book, The Soul of India. Okay, in that book, okay, he is writing. These are his words, not mine. So let's see. The reawakening of national consciousness and aspirations in our own time has revived the ancient idealism of the Sakti cult. The Durga, the Kali, the Jagadhatri, the Bhavani, and all the other great forms used by the Sakti worshippers have received a new meaning. So, if you had to evoke the sentiments of nationalism, you have to appeal and take support of the ideas of the Shakti traditions. What does this tell you? The idea of Rashtra is no separate from the idea of Dharma. Okay, so here Bipin Chandra Pal, he is writing in his book, he is appealing to the nationalism based on the sentiments of Shakti. Okay, he goes on to write, these are different manifestation of the mother. This mother is the spirit of Bharat. This geographical habitat of ours is only the outer body of the mother. Behind this physical and geographical body, there is a being, a personality, the personality of mother. Okay, now I will leave it to your conscience, I will leave it to your reason, your appeal, So I'm appealing to your understanding of reason. What does this mean? Okay, that's for you to decide. So now let's focus on this origin of Congress. Right? We have to come a little bit back. We were talking about the year of 1905, but we'll talk about the founding of the National Congress, that is in 1885. Okay, so this is one of the members of the Congress, AC Majumdar. Okay, he wrote a book. The name of that book was Indian Political Evolution. He wrote a book, okay, in 1915. He himself was a member of Congress, and this is he writing in his book. Okay, let's read what he has to say. Apart from the question of reforms with which it is immediately concerned, it is engaged in a much wider and a nobler task for which it has already laid a fairly solid foundation. The task of nation building in India after the model of modern Europe. What is he saying? That the nation of Bharat has to be built on European lines. When you say European lines, meaning the idea of nation state. When you say nation state, you say the idea of written down constitution based on monotheistic idea of a homogeneous society. Okay, coming in contact with Western people, this is him speaking. Coming in contact with Western people and Western culture, the Indian mind could not fail to expand in the direction of the Western ideas and Western institution. So, what was the bedrock of the political consciousness of the National Congress? European political ideas of nation state. What does nation state mean? A homogeneous society. What is a homogeneous society? Each and every individual in that society adhering to the same rules that has to be written down in a constitution. Okay, so this is him saying, not me. All right, and to this very day there isn't any change in the political ideology of Congress. They have not bothered to change it. Okay, so this reflects the colonial consciousness that has been entrenched in the political party that today we like to call as Congress. Okay, now the last part in this video is going to be about the English education. Okay, now there was this clear distinction. Okay, British over here was the colonial master. Okay, the subjects of the colonial masters was divided into was fragmented into two types of people. On the one side there were pagan natives, on the other side there were converted natives. Okay, now how did these both communities perceive English education? What did the pagan native do? The pagan native wholeheartedly absorbed the English education without any filters, because we were somehow convinced by the masters, the colonial masters, that if you adopt this way of life, your life will improve drastically. We have covered this in one of our previous videos, so if you don't have sufficient context, I urge you to go back to those videos and refer to it. But right now we are going to compare both the approaches as to how the pagan natives and how the Muslim converted natives perceived English education. So for the pagan native, since there is this inherent adaptable character inside us, we wholeheartedly absorbed English language, English mannerisms and whatnot, and occupied all those positions in the English employment. Compare it to the Muslim converted natives. What did they do? They did adopt English education, but with some Islamic filters. All right, let me substantiate and corroborate that with the current day example. So whenever there is a religious issue that comes up in our country, all right, the pagan natives, what will they be told? No, you need to adhere to the principles of secularism. Okay, then the pagan asks, what is secularism? Okay, secularism according to Christianity means that you have to be tolerant and accommodating about the religious practices of another denomination. Okay, all right, so this is what we are told. So what about the Muslim converted natives of Bharat? What are they told when there is a question of religious tolerance? Where do they derive their definition of secularism from? They will derive their definition of religious secularism from their own religious scriptures. their commentary of their own Islamic scholars. So you see the difference in the interpretation of secularism. All right, so this is all there is. Here, before we conclude this video, I have for you a statement by John Bright. Okay, John Bright, who is later been labeled, or he has been given this epithet of friend of India by AC Majumdar, whom I just quoted. Okay, so this is John Bright saying in 1853. Okay, there never was a more docile people, never a more tractable nation. What he's saying over here is that the people of Bharat, they are docile, meaning we are readily, convinced. We readily believe people what people tell us. This is him saying in 1853. This is not me. These are his words. There never was a more docile people, never a more tractable nation. The opportunity is present and the power is not wanting. Let us not abandon the policy of aggression and confine ourselves to a territory 10 times the size of France, with a population 4 times as numerous as that of United Kingdom. Educate the people of India, govern them wisely, and gradually the distinctions of caste will disappear, and they will look upon us rather as benefactors than as conquerors. Okay? Parallelly, imagine what political parties today perpetuate this political discourse of colonial masters benefiting the Bharat nation in some way. This is him saying in 1853. Okay? Educate the people of India, govern them wisely, gradually the distinctions of caste will disappear, and they will look upon us rather as benefactors than as conquerors. And if we desire to see Christianity in some form professed in that country, we shall sooner attain our object by setting the example of high toned Christian morality than by any other means we can employ. This is John Bright saying, this is not me. Okay. And the last part, if that does not convince you that indeed colonizer here was the idea of converting and getting more and more converts to their version of Christianity, this is Deputy Commissioner of Sylhet. Sylhet was a province in Assam. H.L. Johnson, this is H.L. Johnson speaking. These are his words, not mine. When an Englishman says he will not be tried by a Bengali, he has history, science, even the Apostle Paul on his side. His assertion of his race superiority is specially justified by the fact that Bengali belongs to a race he has conquered. So what happened was, when the natives, the pagan natives, started learning English, they started absorbing all the wisdom there was on offer by the British, and quite frankly, wasn't much on offer. So within a span of few decades, the pagan natives, they were able to absorb all there was. So they started occupying positions of power such as judges, commissioners. They were qualified to occupy these positions of power. So what controversy sprung up from this was, so when there was any crime committed by any person who was not from Bharat, specifically any person who was from who was a British national, anybody from the company, any white person over here. So whenever that person was brought to trial in court, okay, that person cannot be tried by any of the native educated judge. Why? Because according to the Deputy Commissioner of Sylhet, H.L. Johnson, he is saying that a Bengali, any native for that matter, cannot try any colonial convict. Why? Because the race to which that convict belongs has conquered the race, will have conquered the race to which the judge would belong. Okay, if this is not a proof of race driven supremacism, some supremacy based and anchored in race, what would that be? Okay, to this very day we still continue with all those all those bodies of justice, all those procedures and whatnot. Majority of the penal code that we still have draws from these acts and charters that were crafted in the Westminster Parliament. Okay, so more about it in the upcoming episodes in this series. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching.